He accidentally got into the alien girl bed. He thought he'd be punished, but Liam had never been to a space station like this. It wasn't like the sleek, streamlined ships he was used to, where everything had its place. This station was enormous, almost like a city floating in the stars. The walls were smooth and shimmering with unfamiliar alien designs, and the halls stretched endlessly in every direction. The Geron, the alien race he was supposed to be working with, had a unique approach to architecture. It was nothing like the functional human ships he was familiar with. Instead, it was a maze of winding corridors, stairways that curved at strange angles, and rooms that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Liam was exhausted. It had been a long day filled with briefings and meetings that barely made sense. He had been introduced to the alien customs, and he'd tried his best to understand, but the Geron were so different from humans. Their ways were strange and their society even stranger. Liam wasn't sure how he felt about it all. His team had been working tirelessly to establish a peaceful relationship with the Geron, but the negotiations were difficult. The two species had only just begun to communicate, and so much of what the Geron did seemed like a mystery. After the day's exhausting diplomatic sessions, Liam had hoped to return to his quarters and get some rest. He was supposed to meet up with his fellow crew members later that evening, but right now, all he wanted was a bed and a few hours of sleep. He had been assigned a small room on the station, but it was tucked far away from the others. He should have asked for directions, but his mind was foggy, and the maze of the station was starting to get to him. His footsteps echoed as he wandered through the dimly lit hallways, too tired to focus on where he was going. The strange sounds of the station, alien humming, distant voices and mechanical noises, mixed with his fatigue. He was almost hypnotized by it, his mind lulling him into a haze. Before he knew it, he was standing in front of a door he didn't recognize. It was large and ornate, unlike his simple room. But all he could think about was the bed behind the door. He just needed to sleep. Liam reached for the door and, without thinking, entered. The space inside was stunning. The room was spacious, with soft, glowing lights illuminating the alien furniture and decorations. It was nothing like the room he had been assigned. This one looked like something reserved for royalty. There were strange plants in the corners, their leaves shimmering with a soft glow, and the walls were adorned with intricate designs that seemed to change as he looked at them. It was both beautiful and overwhelming, but Liam was too tired to process any of it. He stumbled toward the bed in the middle of the room, too sleepy to notice the strange carvings on the bed frame. The mattress was large, with shimmering sheets that looked soft enough to sink into. Without a second thought, Liam collapsed onto the bed, kicking off his boots and letting the exhaustion take over. He was asleep almost immediately, his body finally able to relax after the long, stressful day. Kara, the young Geron ambassador, had just returned to her quarters after a long meeting with the human diplomats. It had been a day filled with tense discussions, cultural misunderstandings, and delicate negotiations. As the Geron representative, she had worked hard to maintain the delicate balance between her people and the humans, trying to ensure that peace would be the outcome of their encounter. But despite her position and composure, she was still just a young Geron, eager to understand the strange ways of humanity. She moved quietly through the halls of the space station, her silvery blue skin shimmering faintly in the low light. Her long, iridescent hair flowed behind her like a stream of liquid light, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence. Yet, despite her regal appearance, there was a curiosity in her that had driven her to seek out more about the humans and their peculiarities. When Kara approached her quarters, she was surprised to find the door unlocked. It wasn't uncommon for Geron to keep their quarters secured, but she had been so preoccupied with her duties that she hadn't locked it herself. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, her sharp gaze scanning the room for any disturbances. The room was just as she had left it, spacious, filled with objects of cultural significance, and elegant in its alien design. But then her eyes landed on the figure lying on her bed. A human. She froze. Liam was sprawled out on her bed, fast asleep. His body was relaxed, one arm hanging off the side of the mattress, his chest rising and falling with every breath. He looked peaceful, completely unaware of his surroundings. Kara's heart skipped a beat as she tried to process what she was seeing. This was unexpected, to say the least. At first, Kara was confused. Had Liam broken into her quarters on purpose? Or had he made a mistake, as humans often did? She took a step forward, her feet barely making a sound against the smooth floor. The way he was lying there, on her personal bed, made her feel uneasy. She had heard of the humans' tendency to act without fully understanding the consequences of their actions, but this was an entirely new level. The longer she watched him, the more confused she became. She had expected anger, or perhaps the Geron equivalent of punishment. But something about the situation felt different. The human didn't seem malicious or aggressive. He was simply tired, and he had no idea where he was. As Kara stood there, her mind raced. What should she do? The rules of her society were clear. Privacy was sacred, and this human had violated it. But something about his innocent presence calmed her, even though it shouldn't. She could easily call for guards, but a strange sense of curiosity stopped her. She took another step toward the bed, her gaze softening as she looked at Liam's peaceful face. "Who are you?" she whispered under her breath, her voice barely audible. She couldn't help but wonder what a human was doing in her bed. And why, despite the violation, she didn't feel angry. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a chance to learn something new. Liam was still asleep, unaware of the alien presence standing over him. He had no idea that his simple mistake had already begun to unravel something much bigger than a simple misunderstanding. Kara studied him for a moment longer, then made a decision. She gently reached forward, tapping his shoulder to wake him. Liam's eyes slowly fluttered open, his mind groggy from sleep. The first thing he noticed was the softness of the bed beneath him. It was far too luxurious compared to the simple cot he'd been assigned. For a moment, he thought maybe he was still dreaming, but then his senses kicked in. The strange, metallic scent in the air, the gentle hum of alien machinery, and the subtle glow from the walls told him that this wasn't the small, cramped room he had been given. He sat up quickly, his heart racing as he took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was far too grand to be his own. Large, ornate furniture filled the space, and strange plants with glowing leaves stood in the corners. The walls shimmered with intricate patterns that seemed to change every time he blinked. It was beautiful, but it also felt wrong. He had to be in the wrong place. "Where am I?" he mumbled to himself, his voice hoarse from the sleep he had just shaken off. Suddenly, Liam froze. His gaze fell on the figure standing at the foot of the bed, watching him. It wasn't just anyone. It was her, the Geron ambassador, Kara. Her silver-blue skin shimmered faintly in the soft light, and her long hair flowed behind her like a cascade of liquid silver. She looked both regal and calm, standing there with an almost unreadable expression on her face. Liam's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected to wake up to a situation like this. The shock of the moment rushed over him in waves. He had been hoping to get some rest, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. He quickly jumped to his feet, instinctively trying to step back, but his limbs felt stiff, as if his body wasn't fully awake yet. Kara's eyes, sharp and knowing, met his. She didn't say anything at first, just observing him in silence. The silence stretched on, making Liam's discomfort grow with each passing second. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I must have gotten lost." His voice was shaky, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "I was looking for my room, and I didn't mean to." Kara raised a hand, silencing him. The movement was elegant, almost graceful, as if she had done it countless times before. She spoke in her native language first, but when Liam didn't understand, she switched to basic galactic common, the universal language for intergalactic diplomacy. "You did not mean to intrude," she asked, her voice soft but firm. "Yet here you are in my private quarters. On my bed, no less." Liam's face flushed with embarrassment. He had expected an angry outburst or at least some form of punishment. But instead, Kara's tone was calm, almost neutral. Still, he could tell she wasn't pleased. The Geron were known for their strict adherence to customs, especially when it came to privacy. I didn't know," Liam said, his words stumbling out in an attempt to explain. "I was just tired and I thought this was my room. I didn't mean to, I didn't think." "Clearly," Kara interrupted, her tone now tinged with a hint of amusement. "You did not think. But the question remains, why did you come here to my quarters instead of your own?" Liam opened his mouth, but no words came out. The truth was, he had no real explanation. His exhaustion, the maze of the space station, and the confusion of the alien architecture had all led to this mistake. But he knew that no excuse could really justify what had happened. He had broken a rule of personal space, something that was sacred to the Geron. Kara studied him for a moment, her eyes piercing through him as though she were looking for something deeper, something beyond the awkwardness of the situation. Finally, she sighed and took a step back, allowing Liam some space. "I do not think punishment is necessary," she said, her voice still calm. "You are a human, and your customs are different from ours. Perhaps you did not understand the severity of what you have done." Liam was still processing her words. He had expected to be arrested, or worse, thrown into some kind of alien prison. Instead, Kara was speaking to him like he was a guest, not a criminal. Her understanding of human behavior, at least her apparent willingness to overlook his mistake, left him both surprised and confused. "I thank you," he said, unsure of what else to say. "I really didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'm just really tired." Kara nodded, her expression softening just a fraction. She seemed to understand. "I can see that. Your people often appear restless. Your minds are quick, but you do not always think before you act. It is something I have observed." Liam felt his cheeks warm again. "Yeah, that sounds about right. We're always in a rush trying to get things done as quickly as possible, but sometimes that leads to mistakes." Kara's eyes glinted with interest. "Mistakes? Yes, that is a common trait among your species. It seems, though, that you are not without honor." She took another step back, giving him more space. "I will allow you to leave without consequence, but there is one condition." Liam blinked in surprise. "A condition?" "Yes," Kara said, her voice suddenly more serious. "You must answer a few questions. In exchange for your mistake, I wish to understand more about your people. The way you think, the way you behave. Your actions are often driven by emotion, and I find that intriguing." Liam hesitated, but the thought of getting out of this without any further trouble was tempting. He nodded slowly. "I'll answer your questions, as best as I can." Kara smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Good, but first you must leave my bed." Liam, not knowing how else to respond, quickly jumped off the bed, his feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. He stood awkwardly beside it, unsure of what to do with his hands. Kara motioned for him to follow her, and he did, still feeling the weight of the situation on his shoulders. They moved through the quarters, Kara leading the way as she gestured to various alien artifacts and objects. "Tell me," she began, her voice casual, "what is it about human emotions that drives you to act without thinking? Is it a weakness, or is it something more?" Liam felt a little caught off guard by the question. It's hard to explain. Emotions are a huge part of being human. Sometimes we don't always think through the consequences of our actions because we're driven by how we feel in the moment. It can be a strength and a weakness at the same time." Kara nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And yet, you humans value freedom, don't you? Freedom to make mistakes, to choose your own path. Yeah, Liam said slowly, feeling more comfortable now. We do. Even when it leads to mistakes, we still believe that we have the right to make our own choices. It's what makes us who we are. Kara's expression softened and she gave him a thoughtful look. That is interesting. I wonder if the Geron would benefit from such thinking. We are a people of rules, of structure, but perhaps we could learn something from you. The next few days passed in a blur of diplomatic meetings and cultural exchanges. After the awkward encounter in her quarters, Liam and Kara found themselves crossing paths more frequently. At first, their interactions were brief and formal, a few words here and there as they navigated the complexities of interspecies communication. But as the days went on, something unexpected began to develop between them, a kind of understanding. Liam had learned more about the Geron in those few days than he could have imagined. Their society was based on strict hierarchy and tradition, with little room for deviation from the established norms. They valued order, structure, and the collective good over individual freedoms. It was a far cry from the human way of thinking, where freedom, choice, and personal growth were at the core of their values. But despite their differences, Kara's curiosity about humanity only seemed to grow. She had begun to ask him more questions, sometimes about the smallest things. Why did humans form friendships? Why did they smile? What did it mean to love or care for someone? Liam was always surprised at how interested she was in these things, as if they were concepts from another world. And despite the initial awkwardness, he found himself enjoying these conversations more than he had expected. One evening, after a particularly exhausting round of talks, Kara approached Liam in the corridor outside the meeting hall. She looked different than usual, her expression softer, more open. There was no official agenda, no talk of politics or interspecies cooperation. Instead, it seemed as though she simply wanted to talk. "Liam," she said, her voice carrying a hint of something new, "would you join me for a walk? There are things I wish to understand about you, about your people." Liam was taken aback by the invitation, a walk with Kara. He hesitated, but something about the way she asked seemed genuine, almost like she was seeking something beyond mere diplomacy. "Sure," he said, his voice a bit uncertain. "I could use some air. Let's go." They made their way through the winding corridors of the space station, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet halls. The station was far quieter than it had been during the day, the usual hum of activity replaced by an eerie stillness. Kara led the way, her silvery blue skin glowing softly in the dim light. As they walked, the conversation drifted from topic to topic. Kara was still fascinated by the smallest details of human life, like the way Liam spoke about his childhood or the traditions that humans had during major life events. She was particularly intrigued by the concept of holidays, times when humans gathered to celebrate life, family, and personal milestones. "There are so many," Kara said, her voice thoughtful. "Why do you celebrate? Does it bring you joy?" Liam smiled slightly. "Yeah, it does. It's a way for people to come together, to remember the good times, and maybe even learn from the bad ones. It's like taking a break from the chaos of everyday life to just be with the people who matter to you." Kara looked at him, her expression intense as if she were trying to understand the deeper meaning behind his words. "I understand, but we do not celebrate in this way. We focus on the greater good, on the needs of the collective." Liam nodded. He had learned that much about the Geron. Their society was built on unity, on ensuring that everyone's actions served the whole, not just the individual. It was a philosophy that had its own strengths, but it also seemed to leave little room for personal connection. "I guess that's what makes us different," Liam said, his voice thoughtful. "Humans put a lot of value on individual choices, even when they're small. It's what makes each of us unique." Kara stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes searching. "Is that why you humans make mistakes?" she asked. "Because you value choice over structure, Liam paused, considering her question. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's not just about making mistakes. It's about learning from them too. The freedom to choose, to decide how we want to live, that's what gives us the opportunity to grow. Even when it leads us down the wrong path, we can always turn back. Kara's eyes softened, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she spoke again, her voice quieter, more introspective. Maybe, maybe that is what I find so intriguing about you, she said. The way you accept mistakes and learn from them. I see so much order in my people's ways, but I wonder if we are missing something. The freedom to change, the freedom to choose. Liam's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected her to say something like that. It was as if she were beginning to understand something fundamental about humanity, the value of choice and the potential for growth, even in the face of failure. Maybe you're right, Liam said. Maybe you don't have to have everything planned out, every move calculated. Maybe there's something to be learned from just living. Kara nodded, a thoughtful look on her face. Perhaps that is why I am so drawn to your people. You are not afraid of uncertainty. You embrace it, even when it leads you into the unknown. Liam couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to Kara in that moment. It wasn't just the diplomatic exchanges or the shared curiosity about each other's cultures. It was something deeper, something that went beyond rules, beyond structure. It was about understanding, about learning from each other. I think we can learn from each other, Liam said softly. Maybe we're not so different after all. Kara met his gaze, her eyes bright with something he couldn't quite place. Maybe, she said, her voice low but sincere. Maybe the key to peace isn't in following all the rules. Maybe it's in understanding the choices we make and how we can grow from them. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, each of them contemplating the weight of their words. The station around them was still and quiet, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. Finally, Kara spoke again, breaking the silence. Liam, there is something I must confess. Since our first meeting, I have been observing your people closely. And while I still do not understand everything about your ways, I have come to respect them. The way you value your individuality, your capacity for growth, your willingness to make mistakes, it is something that I find admirable. Liam blinked in surprise. I didn't expect that. I know, Kara said with a soft smile. I did not expect it either. But perhaps in time I will understand more, and perhaps my people will understand as well. Liam's heart raced. He hadn't expected this kind of connection, not with someone from a completely different species, let alone an ambassador. But in this moment, standing there in the quiet corridors of the space station, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel: hope. Hope that despite their differences, they could find common ground. Hope that their worlds could come together, not just through rules and regulations, but through understanding and empathy. As they continued their walk through the space station, the two of them no longer felt like representatives of their respective species. They were simply two individuals, sharing a moment of discovery. And for the first time, Liam felt that the impossible could become possible. The days after their walk had been filled with a newfound sense of ease between Liam and Kara. The initial tension from their awkward first encounter had long since faded. Instead, there was a quiet understanding that seemed to have developed between them, one that was built on mutual respect and curiosity. Both of them were learning, in their own ways, about the other's world. The diplomatic discussions between the humans and the Geron had entered a more promising phase. The tension that had marked the first few days of the negotiations had subsided, replaced by a sense of cooperation. The two species, though vastly different, were starting to see the value in each other's perspectives. And while Liam and Kara's personal connection wasn't the sole reason for this shift, it had played a subtle but important role. It was late one evening when Kara approached Liam again, this time in the quiet garden area of the space station. She had sent a message asking him to meet her there, and he'd agreed without hesitation. He had begun to look forward to their conversations, even though he still couldn't fully understand all of Kara's customs or her people's ways. As he arrived at the garden, he found her standing by a glowing fountain, the soft sound of water filling the air. The lights around the space reflected in the water, casting shimmering patterns on the stone floor. Kara stood still, her gaze focused on the movement of the water, but as soon as she noticed Liam, she turned to greet him. "You came," she said, her voice a little softer than usual. Liam smiled. "I always do when I'm invited. What's on your mind?" Kara tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I have been thinking a lot about our conversations," she said. "About what you said, the idea that mistakes are a part of growth, and I wonder if perhaps my people have missed something by avoiding mistakes. We are taught to be perfect, to always follow the rules, but I am starting to see that there is value in imperfection." Liam's eyebrows raised in surprise. "You've been thinking about that?" Kara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yes. I have seen how your people embrace mistakes and learn from them. You do not fear them. It is something I cannot fully understand, but I believe it is something important, something my people have yet to learn." Liam was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. "I think it's because we believe in second chances," he said finally. "We're not perfect and we know that, but we always have the opportunity to try again, even when things go wrong." Kara seemed to consider this. "A second chance, that is an interesting idea." They stood in silence for a few moments, the soft hum of the station surrounding them. The garden felt peaceful, but there was an underlying weight to the conversation. They weren't just talking about culture anymore. They were talking about something deeper, the idea of learning, of changing, of growing. Finally, Kara spoke again. "I have something I need to tell you, Liam." He looked at her, sensing the shift in her tone. "What is it?" "There is something we Geron believe," Kara said, her voice growing more serious. "We believe that the strength of our society depends on our ability to maintain order. Without it, we would fall into chaos. That is why we place so much value on tradition and the rules we live by." Liam nodded. He had already learned a bit about Geron philosophy during their discussions. Their emphasis on order and structure was at the core of their identity. He could see why it worked for them, at least to some extent, but it also seemed like something was missing. "But I am beginning to question it," Kara continued, her voice softer now. "I see the way you humans approach life. You do not live according to a rigid set of rules. You create your own paths, even when they are uncertain. And that is something I think I am beginning to understand. Perhaps it is time for the Geron to change, not completely, but to embrace the possibility of imperfection." Liam felt a sense of awe. Kara was speaking openly, something he hadn't expected. The idea of a species like the Geron, so focused on order, considering the value of imperfection, was monumental. "I think change is a good thing," Liam said slowly. "It's hard, but it's the only way we grow. It's the only way to move forward." Kara nodded, her eyes distant as she looked at the fountain. "You are right. We are taught to avoid change, to preserve what has always been, but perhaps that is what has held us back. Perhaps the strength of our society comes not from perfect order but from the acceptance of imperfection. I will speak to the council. I will tell them that we need to consider new ways, the ways of the humans." Liam didn't know what to say. He had never imagined that his casual observations about humanity could spark such deep thoughts in Kara. But as they stood there together, he realized that this was more than just a diplomatic exchange. This was a personal revelation, a moment of true understanding. "I think you're going to make a big difference," Liam said quietly. Kara turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a look that seemed almost vulnerable. "I hope so," she said. "I hope that I can help my people see what I see, but it will not be easy. It will take time." Liam smiled. "It always does, but you've got to start, and I think that's what counts." Kara smiled back, a genuine, soft smile that was rare for her. For a moment, the weight of their roles, the ambassador and the diplomat, seemed to disappear. They were just two individuals standing in the quiet garden, sharing a moment of understanding. "I will do my best," Kara said, "and I will not forget what I have learned from you, from your people." Liam felt a sense of pride, but also a sense of connection. It wasn't just about the diplomatic mission anymore. It was about the change they could bring together. "Thanks, Kara," he said. "I'm glad we met." Kara's smile widened slightly. "As am I." They stood there for a few more moments, side by side, the garden peaceful around them. The stars outside the station's walls twinkled in the vast emptiness of space, as if they, too, were witnessing this small but significant moment in history. And Liam realized something then. This wasn't just about forging a new relationship between humans and Geron. It was about forging a new understanding between two individuals from different worlds. And in that understanding, there was hope. Hope that even the most rigid systems could change. Hope that differences, no matter how vast, could be bridged with empathy and willingness to learn. As Kara turned to leave, Liam followed her, knowing that they had both taken the first steps toward something better. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time it felt full of possibilities.